We are now joined by State Senator and Minority Leader Rob Ortt, who represents parts of Niagara and Orleans counties. Senator, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's just first talk about how you guys found out about this and how much is really in that pot.
Yeah, so good to be with both of you. We found out about it really through the work of our staff, our finance and budget staff. As we go through the budgets, we're always trying to look for, hey, what are things that we can do to support to lower people's bills, to return money to folks. And the projection now, it's over $2 billion. The projection at the end of this year, meaning at the end of the fiscal budget that we're contemplating and going through, would be over $3 billion. And these are collected. These are surcharges that are collected by the utility and then remitted to NYSERDA as part of green. These are green initiatives. These are, part of both CLCPA related initiatives and other green initiatives that NYSERDA forces the utilities to collect and then are remitted to them. And as you pointed out, they are holding these at a time when utility rates are skyrocketing here in New York. We are over 50% higher than the national average, and we are up to, in some cases, high 30s, almost 40% higher than Pennsylvania. That's unacceptable. In a state like ours, it's already very expensive. We should be looking for ways, not bankrolling and earmarking and hoarding billions of dollars that can be returned to ratepayers to help offset these huge energy bills.
Rob, as you know, that video goes on for a couple of more minutes. That exchange kind of continues, and then it flips to questioning a state representative who also could not come up with answers as to where this $2 billion or $2 to $3 billion was earmarked. Have you received, or has anyone in the legislature received any answers, any updates to those questions, which are seemingly simple? Here is this money in the bank. Why do you have it, and where is it going to be spent?
Right. Well, so I think I have not received any further answer because the answer is they don't know. That really is the answer, or they're saving it. I think she put it. These might take years to collect and make these investments. The reality is they don't know. At this juncture, they don't know. Maybe there's some long-range goal or something they're trying to invest in. But again, right now, today, the surcharge will remain. I would love to get rid of that. What we're calling for at this moment is simply actually there's two related bills. One is return this money to ratepayers. That is, we need to do something bold and immediate. I'm sure your viewers would say, they hear the different talk and the different sides, and that's great. They might be on one side or the other. What they are looking for is immediate action and relief to help them lower their costs. This would do that. The other piece is there's a bill that would call for a greater transparency and accountability of the various surcharges that New Yorkers pay as part of their energy bill and where that money goes. And I think if people knew all the different taxes and surcharge that they pay in this state and where it goes, something like this, heads would roll and there'd be even more outcry from the general public.
I mean, I suggest everybody look at their bill. A lot of us just pay the bill. Go to the itemized bill. Check that out, because it is eye-opening for sure. What have you heard, State Senator, from your constituents, and what have you seen yourself about the hike, just even in the last 5 years, utilities here in New York State?
Listen, on social media, phone calls, emails, and of course, I never want to lose sight of that. Just when I'm out, right? When I'm out and I'm with friends and family, or I'm at a dinner or something in the community, it is a major topic. I do think sometimes people don't connect the bill they pay to policies and sort of the government part of it, right? They just assume, well, that must just be the price of electricity, or that might be the price of natural gas or whatever, or it might just be the greedy utility company looking to sort of, get more money from me. I don't think people connect this as in New York especially, there's a cost associated with policies that come out of Albany, and there are things that state lawmakers can do, certainly in this state, to offset those costs or even lower those costs. The reality is we've been doing things in this state, you mentioned the past 5 years, since 2019 when the CLCPA was adopted, that have actually driven these costs up higher and projected to even drive these costs up higher still. And so part of what I'm trying to do, and I think our conference, is to educate voters and just the general public that there are things that we can do and things we are doing that do affect your energy bill. And there's things we can do to lower it. And there's things we are doing that are compounding and are part of why it's going up.
Quick response from the Hochul administration, then I do want to get your response, Senator. She says if these state Senate Republicans were serious about driving down energy costs, they would push their GOP colleagues in Washington to stop trying to kill key energy projects that will provide needed supply and lift the Trump tariffs that are driving energy supply costs up across the board. To that, sir, you say what?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we, for many years under the Biden administration, our Republican friends in Washington were the lead advocates.
We don't need to relitigate 4 or 5 years ago. Specifically, what they're talking about are the current tariffs and other things.
Yeah, but let's be honest. The tariffs are not having any impact right now. These are policies that we are doing here in New York that is, I just talked about. We're 50% higher than the national average. We're 40% higher than Pennsylvania. They're part of the United States. They're affected by the same policies. The only thing Governor Hochul can do when she is in a tough spot is to try to blame President Trump and Washington Republicans. She takes no accountability, zero, about her policies and how they're affecting the state of New York. She's the governor of New York. If she's serious about this, she'll do something to lower these costs. So far, she hasn't, and New Yorkers should take her by her actions.
All right, State Senator Rob Ortt, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much.